In the winter of 1932, my great-grandmother fed a family of 9 through 4 months of snow with no electricity, no refrigerator, and no grocery store within 12 miles. She did not do this because she was exceptional. She did it because every woman on her street knew exactly how to do the same thing. They had all learned it from their mothers, who learned it from theirs, going back further than anyone could remember. I am Franny, and what I am going to share with you today is the exact system those women used, 15 specific methods for preserving food without electricity that kept families fed through entire winters, some of them lasting 2 full years without spoiling. I have spent the better part of 3 decades researching, testing, and using these methods in my own home, not as a hobby, as a way of life. Stay until the end because the method I have saved for last is the one the refrigerator industry worked hardest to make you forget, because it is the only preservation method that actually improves the nutritional value of food rather than just slowing its decay. I will tell you what it is, exactly how to do it, and why food scientists at independent research universities now confirm what your great-grandmother already knew. But first, I want to tell you something that should bother you. In 1913, the first electric home refrigerator was introduced to the American market by a company called Domelry. By 1944, refrigerators were in 34% of American homes. By 1960, that number was 98%. And in that same span of time, less than 50 years, the entire body of knowledge that American women had carried for generations about how to keep food safe, nutritious, and edible without electricity was almost completely erased from common practice. It did not disappear because it stopped working. Salt curing works exactly as well today as it did in 1920. Root cellaring works exactly as well. Fermentation works better than it ever did, now that we understand the microbiology behind it. These methods disappeared because the refrigerator industry needed you to believe that the only safe way to store food was inside a machine they manufactured, that ran on electricity they did not provide, that broke down and required service calls they could profit from, and that needed to be replaced every 15 to 20 years at a cost of $800 to $2,000. They did not tell you that most of what goes into a modern refrigerator did not need to be refrigerated at all. They did not tell you that many foods stored by traditional methods last longer than the same foods in a refrigerator. And they absolutely did not tell you that some traditional preservation methods produce food that is more nutritious than fresh food. Here is what your great-grandmother knew. The first method is root cellaring, and it is the oldest food preservation system in human history. A root cellar is any space that maintains a temperature between 32 and 50 degrees Fahrenheit and a humidity between 85 and 95% year-round. Below ground, the earth acts as a natural insulator, holding temperature steady regardless of what happens at the surface. A properly built root cellar maintains these conditions through summer heat and winter freeze without any mechanical assistance whatsoever. What keeps in a root cellar? Carrots, parsnips, turnips, beets, potatoes, sweet potatoes, winter squash, cabbage, apples, and pears. All of these, when properly harvested and stored with their skins intact and without washing, will keep in a root cellar for 4 to 6 months. Carrots buried in damp sand in a root cellar keep for up to 8 months. Apples wrapped individually in newspaper and stored in wooden crates keep for 4 to 5 months. You do not need to build a dedicated root cellar to use this method. A corner of an unheated basement that maintains a temperature below 50 degrees in winter is a root cellar. An insulated box buried in the ground below frost line is a root cellar. A north-facing closet on the ground floor with ventilation to the outside is a root cellar. The principle is the same: cool, humid, dark, and consistent. Your great-grandmother did not refrigerate root vegetables. She never needed to. The second method is salt curing, and it is the reason that before refrigeration, meat did not spoil. Salt kills bacteria by a process called osmosis. When salt contacts the surface of meat, it draws moisture out of the meat and simultaneously draws moisture out of any bacteria present. The bacteria die of dehydration. At the same time, the salt itself penetrates the meat and creates an environment so inhospitable to microbial growth that the meat can be kept safely for months, in some cases years, without refrigeration. The dry cure method that farmhouse kitchens used from 1850 through 1940. For every pound of pork, combine 1 tablespoon of coarse, non-iodized salt, 1 teaspoon of curing salt, which is sodium nitrate available at any butcher supply or online, 1 teaspoon of brown sugar, and half a teaspoon of black pepper. Rub this mixture thoroughly into every surface of the meat. Pack the meat tightly into a non-reactive container, such as a ceramic crock, and store it in a cool location between 36 and 40 degrees for 7 days per inch of thickness. After curing, hang the meat in a cool, dry, well-ventilated space. Properly cured pork keeps for 12 to 18 months without refrigeration. The refrigerator industry told you that unrefrigerated meat is dangerous. What they did not tell you is that improperly refrigerated meat is also dangerous, and that the salt curing methods practiced for centuries had a food safety record that their machine could not improve upon. The third method is lard preservation, and it is the one that surprises people most. Cooked meat submerged entirely in rendered lard and stored in a cool location keeps for 3 to 6 months without refrigeration. This method, called confit in French cooking, though American farmhouses used it long before the French term arrived, works because lard creates a complete oxygen barrier over the surface of the meat. Bacteria that cause meat to spoil are almost universally aerobic. They require oxygen to grow. Remove the oxygen and you remove the conditions for spoilage. The method, render lard by cutting pork fat into small pieces and cooking slowly over low heat until the fat has fully liquefied and all the water has evaporated. You will know the water is gone when the bubbling stops. Strain the rendered lard through cheesecloth into a clean ceramic crock. Cook your meat, chicken pieces, pork chops, duck legs, rabbit fully through until the internal temperature reaches at least 165 degrees. Pack the cooked meat into the crock. Pour the hot rendered lard over the meat until every piece is submerged by at least 1 inch of lard. Allow to cool completely. Seal with a tight-fitting lid and store in a cool location. The lard will solidify and form a complete seal. Do not break this seal until you are ready to use the meat. In a root cellar or cool basement at 40 to 50 degrees, lard-preserved meat keeps safely for up to 6 months. Independent food safety researchers who have studied this method confirm that the absence of oxygen inside the lard seal creates conditions in which the bacterial growth that causes spoilage simply cannot occur. The fourth method is sugar preservation, and it is not just for jams. Sugar, like salt, kills bacteria through osmosis. At high enough concentrations, above 65% by weight in the finished product, sugar creates an environment in which bacteria cannot survive. This is why honey, which is approximately 80% sugar, never spoils. Archaeologists have found honey in 3,000-year-old Egyptian tombs that was still edible. Sugar preservation at the concentrations used in traditional canning and preserving is effective for the same reason. Traditional sugar preserves that do not require refrigeration. Whole fruit preserved in heavy syrup at a ratio of 2 cups sugar to 1 cup water, packed into sterilized glass jars and sealed while hot. Fruit butters, cooked fruit with sugar until thick enough to mound on a spoon, sealed in hot, sterilized jars. Candied citrus peel, fruit cheeses, quince paste, all of these, properly sealed, keep at room temperature for 12 to 24 months. The method for sterilizing jars that your great-grandmother used, Wash jars and lids in hot soapy water. Rinse completely. Place in a large pot. Cover with cold water. Bring to a rolling boil and keep at a boil for 10 minutes. Remove with tongs and fill immediately with the hot preserve. Invert the jar for 2 minutes to sterilize the lid seal, then right side up to cool. A properly sealed jar will have a concave lid. The center will be slightly sunken. If the lid flexes up and down when pressed, the seal did not form and the jar must be refrigerated and used within 2 weeks. The fifth method is vinegar brining, and it is the reason that pickles, relishes, and fermented vegetables were a staple of every American household from the colonial era through the Second World War. Vinegar with an acidity of at least 5% creates an environment with a pH below 4.6, which is the threshold below which the bacteria that cause foodborne illness cannot survive. This is a hard biological limit, not a theory, not folk wisdom, but a documented fact of microbiology that food safety researchers at agricultural universities have confirmed repeatedly. A food submerged in 5% acidity vinegar brine cannot harbor Clostridium botulinum, Salmonella, or E. coli at levels that cause illness. The basic quick pickle brine: 1 cup white vinegar at 5% acidity, 1 cup water, 1 tablespoon non-iodized salt, 1 tablespoon sugar. Bring to a boil, pour over clean vegetables packed into sterilized jars, seal immediately. This brine works for cucumbers, green beans, carrots, cauliflower, peppers, onions, beets, and radishes. Properly sealed, quick pickled vegetables keep at room temperature for up to 12 months. For a deeper flavor and a different preservation mechanism, the farmhouse also used lacto-fermentation, which is the sixth method and the one I want to spend a little extra time on because it is the most misunderstood. Lacto-fermentation does not use vinegar. It uses salt and thyme. When vegetables are submerged in a 2% salt brine, the lactobacillus bacteria that are naturally present on the surface of all vegetables begin to consume the sugars in the vegetables and produce lactic acid as a byproduct. As lactic acid accumulates, the pH of the brine drops below 4.6, the same threshold that vinegar achieves, and the environment becomes inhospitable to pathogenic bacteria. The lactobacillus continue to thrive because they are acid tolerant. Everything else dies. The result is a food that is preserved not by killing all bacteria, but by allowing the right bacteria to establish dominance. Sauerkraut, kimchi, traditional dill pickles, kvass, beet kvass, traditional crock pickles. These are all lacto-fermented foods. They require no vinegar, no heat processing, no canning equipment, and no electricity. They require only vegetables, non-iodized salt, water, a clean ceramic crock or glass jar, and thyme. The basic lacto-fermentation brine: 1 tablespoon of non-iodized salt per 2 cups of filtered water. Non-iodized because iodine kills bacteria, including the lactobacillus you are trying to cultivate. Filtered because chlorinated tap water can also inhibit fermentation. Pack your vegetables tightly into a clean, wide-mouthed jar or crock. Pour the brine over until all vegetables are submerged. Weight them down with a clean stone or a water-filled zip bag so nothing floats above the brine. Cover loosely with a cloth to allow gas to escape and leave at room temperature. 65 to 75 degrees is ideal for 3 to 7 days. Taste daily starting on day 3. When the flavor is sour and complex to your liking, seal the jar and move it to a cool location. Properly fermented vegetables keep for 6 to 12 months. Here's the part that the refrigerator industry never told you, and the part that independent nutritional researchers are now documenting in detail. Lacto-fermented vegetables are more nutritious than the fresh vegetables you started with. The fermentation process increases the bioavailability of vitamins, particularly B vitamins and vitamin C. It produces beneficial bacteria that support gut health in ways that refrigerated fresh vegetables cannot. not. And it produces enzymes that aid digestion of the same food. Your great-grandmother did not ferment vegetables because she was ahead of her time nutritionally. She did it because it was the only practical way to preserve them through winter. But the result was a food that was better for the people eating it than the same vegetable would have been eaten fresh. Modern nutritional science has now confirmed this. It was not confirmed in time to prevent the refrigerator from replacing the crock, but it has been confirmed. The seventh method is smoke curing, and it layered on top of salt curing to extend the preservation period even further. Smoke contains phenols, aldehydes, and organic acids that are antimicrobial and that penetrate the surface of meat and fish to create an additional barrier against bacterial growth beyond what salt alone provides. Cold smoking, which means smoking at temperatures between 68 and 86 degrees Fahrenheit for periods ranging from several hours to several days, does not cook the meat but deposits a thick layer of antimicrobial compounds into the surface. Hot smoking at temperatures above 160 degrees both preserves and fully cooks the meat simultaneously. Properly cold smoked and salt cured fish, which is what your grandmother called saltfish or smoked herring, keeps without refrigeration for 6 to 12 months when stored in a cool, dry location. Properly hot smoked and salt cured pork, which is what your grandmother called country ham, keeps without refrigeration for up to 2 years when hung in a cool, ventilated smokehouse or cellar. The smokehouse was not a feature of rural American farms because rural Americans were primitive. It was a feature because it worked. Every farm that had a smokehouse had a year-round supply of preserved protein that required no electricity, no service contract, and no appliance that could break. The eighth method is drying, and it is the simplest preservation method that exists. Bacteria require moisture to grow. Remove moisture from a food, and you remove the conditions for bacterial growth entirely. Dried foods at below 14% moisture content are microbiologically stable indefinitely. This is why dried herbs, dried legumes, dried grains, and dried fruits found in archaeological sites, thousands of years old, are sometimes still viable for planting. Sun drying, slice fruits or vegetables thinly and evenly, lay on clean wooden or wicker trays in full sun, cover with cheesecloth to keep insects off, and leave until completely dry and leathery with no moisture at the center when bent. For most fruits, apples, pears, plums, apricots, tomatoes, this takes 3 to 5 days of full sun in dry weather. Dried fruits stored in sealed glass jars in a dark location keep for 12 to 18 months. Oven drying at the lowest possible oven temperature, typically 150 to 170 degrees Fahrenheit, with the oven door cracked open slightly to allow moisture to escape, achieves the same result in 6 to 12 hours for most produce. An electric dehydrator achieves it in 4 to 8 hours. All three methods produce a product with the same shelf stability. Your great-grandmother used the sun and a breeze. The result was identical. The ninth method is alcohol preservation, and it is the reason that fruit brandies, liqueurs, and fruit in brandy were a staple of 19th century American households. Alcohol at concentrations above 20% by volume is an effective antimicrobial agent. Fruit submerged in brandy, bourbon, rum, or vodka at 40 proof or higher, which is 20% alcohol, are preserved indefinitely. The alcohol prevents bacterial and mold growth while simultaneously extracting flavor compounds from the fruit into the spirit, producing a liquid that is both a preservative and a flavoring agent. Rumtopf, the German practice of preserving seasonal fruits in rum throughout the summer and fall, produces a preserve that keeps for over a year at room temperature and that improves in flavor over time as the fruit macerates in the spirit. The same principle produces the brandied cherries, preserved figs, and spiced pears that appear in farmhouse recipe collections from the 19th century through the 1940s, after which they largely disappeared from American kitchens as refrigeration made them seem unnecessary. They were not unnecessary. They were an elegant, effective, and delicious preservation method that the refrigerator made redundant without replacing the flavor or the cultural practice that produced it.